Thanks for joining us for another episode of The Art of Feminine Negotiation. And I'm really looking forward to today's conversation. Joining me today is Mark Steven Porro, and we're going to be talking about negotiating as a caregiver. So welcome, Mark. It's so great to have you here.
Well, it's good to be here. Thank you very much.
And for those of you who don't know Mark, he's a New Jersey native, which I love, being a big Springsteen fan myself. But he's got an interesting background. He's an award-winning designer. He's a writer. He's an actor and director. He's certainly written lots of jokes. I can't wait to hear. He's got quite a dry sense of humor. He's done screenplays, award-winning short films. And the thing that attracted me to get him on the show here today is a book that he's released called A Cup of Tea on the Commode. And we'll get into that. And it's a beautifully crafted, very sad, sweet, and also funny debut memoir. It chronicles his, as he calls it, multitasking adventures when he filled his mother's last years with love and laughter and joy being her caretaker. And we don't talk a lot about negotiating as a caretaker, so I wanted to dig into that. So why don't you kickstart us off, Mark? Tell us, I think it was you were 55 years old. You gave up your carefree bachelor life that people were very jealous of and to come and care for your mother. So what prompted that decision for you? That's a big lifestyle change.
Well, I had a really good relationship with both my mother and my father. So I got a call from my brother. At the time, I was actually in Michigan, but I was living in Los Angeles. And my sister also had a design firm. So I would go out there and help her design firm once in a while because I had a snack food company in LA. And every once in a while, we needed some extra cash. So
yeah.
It was a win-win. And then I got a call from my brother. And my mother was, I think, eight or 9 days after her 89th birthday. She just shut down. And it looked like she just wanted to leave this earth. And so I flew in and found her in her bed at home. And my brother was there, I think another sibling or so. But we all came in. She had 6 kids and we all came in. Wow. And hospice was there. And when I heard hospice was there before I arrived, I kind of freaked out because 14 years earlier, my father, we called hospice for my dad. And 2 days later, he passed. Yeah. So usually hospice gets called when the end is pretty much inevitable. So it was important to get home as soon as possible. Anyway, mom was there, non-responsive. And I started looking around the environment, which was the home that we all grew up in. And it used to be a beautiful, loving, welcoming home. Yeah. And it didn't seem to be that anymore. We had some people that moved in, not really caretaking, but they were overseeing it because at that point, my mother could walk but she needed help with laundry and cooking meals and just managing the household. Yeah. And but now is a different story. She seemed to be on her deathbed. So she was a Catholic. So we called in a priest for the last rites. And the doctor cut off all meds and food and said, let her go. Wow. And so we were on death watch. Yeah. And she responded. She barely opened her eyes, but she responded to touch. Yeah. And, but she didn't talk at all. And then we had a number, when hospice is there, they have the supervisor comes in, assesses the situation. And then they have a number of hospice nurses because they were going to be there until mom passed or recovered. Yeah. And so we had a lot of different nurses come in and a few of them didn't follow the rules. The directive was no food, no meds. Yeah. No getting out of bed, let her go. Give her a little, maybe ice water or something to give her some comfort and moisture on her tongue and stuff. Anyway, this one nurse came in and she looks at my mom and my mom again is sleeping and she says, "Are you hungry, Mrs. Porro?" And my sister and I wanted to jump over the bed and kill this person. So, who are you? What do you think you're doing? But my mother's eyes shot open. Oh, for the first time in weeks. And then this nurse accused us of starving our mother to death. Oh, geez. And so we got angry with that accusation. So we had her call her supervisor. Her supervisor said, "Please leave because you broke the rules. These people are not starving their mother to death. This is the directive." Yeah. She left, but now I'm thinking, yeah, oh what are we starving our mother to death? So I go into her room, just I'm riddled with guilt, and said, "Mom, are you hungry?" And she says, "What do you got?" And the first words in weeks. And I said, "Anything you want." And she goes, "How about some pumpkin pie?" Well, this time it's in this whole thing started in February. Now it's in March, and that's not exactly pumpkin pie season. Yeah. But I went out in the living room. My older brother who lived in the neighborhood I asked him if he wanted to go out and try to find some pumpkin pie. And by some small miracle, he came back in about a half hour with 2 pumpkin pies.
Yeah, that's
So
hilarious.
she eats. We gave her a bite of for her first bite of in weeks of food, and she spit it out. And we said, "Well, that didn't go so well."
Yeah.
So we tried again, and she downed half the pie. And the next day she downed the next half, and the next day the pie gone, and she's wide awake now.
Yeah.
And so we figured it was, as I call in the book, a cry for help.
Yeah.
She was not happy. She had bouts of depression throughout her life, not major ones, at least that I knew of. But this, she definitely wanted to check out. And so we all came in and we showed her what love was all about and how much we loved her, and she snapped out of it.
I love that. Now, you quipped that your mom was like a 90-year-old sharp-tongued, guilt-tripping, stubborn lady who couldn't remember your name half the time. So I'd love if you could share with our listeners, like, how did you negotiate with yourself to get over what for most people ends up being sort of a deal-breaking challenge, right? Because they get in reactive mode. I'd love how you handle that.
Well, the important thing was to rescue mom. And once she snapped out of it, I started looking around the environment and said that this is not a happy place anymore.
Yeah.
So I made the commitment. I didn't move back yet. I moved back later in the year, but I made the commitment to be there for several weeks and learn what I could from hospice.
Yeah.
And so when you make that commitment, no matter what the situation is, out of her 6 kids, I was the only one she couldn't remember who I was. Not all the time, but a good part of the time.
Yeah.
And one morning, she says, "So what is it I call you?" And I said, "Are you kidding me?" Because she had a pretty good sense of humor.
Yeah.
And she said, "No." And I said, "Name your kids." And she rattled off all 5, except for me. I'm the 5th. But she rattled them all, Laurel, Michael, David, Carol, DC, and she's stumped.
Yeah.
So I said, "Mark," and she says, "Mark." "Mark with a K?" I said, "Yes." "Your favorite son?" And she says, "I don't have favorites." And I said, "Well, you have a favorite to forget."
Yeah.
So to help her, I made a visual aid. I made my name, wrote my name in big block letters and put it on the ceiling, because when I'd greet her in the morning, she would be in her bed looking up.
Yeah.
And so it evolved into a game. I'd come in and say, "Good morning." She'd say, "Good morning, Mark." And then, so that's how we did it. And eventually she did remember my name, but there were a few times where you just say, "Listen, this is my mom." And you have to understand, I guess, the situation. So humor played a big role. So I didn't take any of it personally. I was there and I was the one. I do have a chapter, does rubbing your loved one butt cause amnesia?
Yeah.
And I think I have proof that, in fact, it does. So we'll have to do a test at some point, and we're looking for volunteers. But again, once you make that commitment to do the job, which I did, I said, I'm not cutting out. I had an MO. I get bored pretty easily. So I've started a lot of companies and gave it my best for a while, and then moved on to something else if I was looking for something more adventurous or exciting. So at that point, I had no children. I was never married. And so my first time being a parent was going to be my 89-year-old mom.
I love it. I love it.
You learn how to be a parent. You can't walk away. So
yes, that's a good call. And I want to circle back, because when you said about not taking it personal, for our listeners there, I really want to put a pin in that for you to think about that, because certainly in caregiving mode, my gosh, I think most people find it so challenging because they take things personally and they get reactive. But I also encourage you to expand the scope of that for our listeners out there. That stands for any negotiation. Most negotiations, in my experience in 30 years of law, they go off the rails because people get reactive. They take things personally. So I think it's beautiful advice. And I love particularly that you're able to do that in the face of your mom forgetting you of the only one of all the kids. So and it can be really stressful. So what tips do you have for caregivers out there on how to negotiate past that stress when you're in that 24/7 lifestyle sometimes?
Well, the biggest advice I could give people is you have to take care of yourself, because stress will creep up on you. And they say, I was doing another show, and this gentleman specialized in stress on caregivers. And he said 1/3 of the caregivers die before their patients die. Yeah. Because of the stress. Yeah. So you have to, I guess, negotiate with yourself that you can handle this. And if you can't, you have to take breaks. Yeah. But every day, almost every day there was a negotiation of some kind. It was whether she wanted to wake up or not, whether she wanted to get out of bed or not, whether she wanted to get on the Commode or not, or eat, or any of
Yeah.
these things. So I always tried to approach it, I guess, with a sense of humor.
Yeah.
It was, charm and humor goes a long way. And so also I had a goal to make her laugh at least once a day.
That's so
And that only relieved any stress that she may have had, certainly relieved any stress I may have had, because it was to get her to laugh was a good indicator that I was doing a good job.
That's beautiful. And again, applies in every relationship in your life, right? This is gorgeous advice for caregivers and for our listeners out there. Think about the struggles you have with your kids, depending on what stage of life they're at, with your intimate partner, in business. Bringing that humor to the table and not taking things personally can go a long way. And thank you, Mark, for talking about the elephant in the room, because, and again, for any of you who are listening today and are caregivers yourself, I want to really put a pin back in what Mark said about make sure you are taking care of yourself as well, because that stat was staggering to me, that 1/3 of caregivers end up dying before the person they're caring for. So make sure you don't become that statistic. And I know we hear, obviously you used humor to great effect and you're a funny guy, which certainly helps. But, we often hear that you need to meet them where they're at. And I know with my mom, it's something I continue to struggle with because, my dad died over 30 years ago. And it's like every day she's, 31 years ago and she forgets that he's died. So what did that look like for you to be able to meet your mom where she was at?
Well, I guess the biggest word is empathy. So you have to put yourself in their shoes, or in my mom's case, her non-slip safety socks, because she never wore shoes again. You have to go with their pace. You have to understand that, again, don't take anything personally. Good thing for me, it didn't start off as a good thing, but my mother did almost outlive me. I had, from stress, I guess I had to deal with some things a couple of years into this where I had to go through some emergency surgeries.
Wow.
That I guess was stress related. But out of that, similar to my mother, I needed help walking when I was in the hospital. I was on major medication, which I had visions similar to my mom. My mom didn't have visions because of medication, but she had a little bit of dementia, and later on it was diagnosed. So she had some, a little bit of Alzheimer's. And and you just needed help and stuff. And it was like, empathy is an important thing. They're still a person. One of the difficulties for me, especially being the son, is I saw my mother naked for the first time. And you got to get over that and say, I'm not in this particular thing. The role of caretaker is more important than the role of the son. So I had to separate myself from that and get over it and get on with the job. And listen to them as best you can. Don't force them to do anything. Don't be the cruel parent, which sometimes is tough. And there are a few times where I blew up, because she was a stubborn little child, I guess, almost like a teenager or something. So, but again, if you can make them laugh or charm them into something, one of the things that I wanted to find out, or I discovered, was wanting to feel pretty doesn't end at 89 or 90. And that was one thing that I don't think that the people who were there, or even my other siblings, who they may be angry that I bring this up, didn't really care about. And I did. I thought it was important. My mother loved her long nails. She used to be a hand model. And then she worked full time. So having 6 kids with beautiful nails and working full time was not an easy task. It was a small miracle that I kept. But she treated herself to a weekly beauty parlor trip where she got a wash and a set, or a shampoo and set, I think it was called, and a manicure. And she never had fake nails. They were gorgeous, and they were still gorgeous. But now they were lethal, because as we get older, we get very itchy. And she has these long nails. And that took, let's say, several negotiations to get her to let me trim those lethal things. And they say Jewish mothers invented guilt, but Catholic mothers perfected it. So I learned from one of the best. And so I used guilt as best I could. And it just said, listen, Mom, I need to trim these things. They're dangerous. You could get an infection and we could have some serious problems. And do you want that on my shoulders to live with for the rest of my life?
Oh, funny.
And I said, a bit dramatic, but it worked.
Well, and how beautiful of you to recognize that as well. Because I agree with you, Mark. I think a lot of people forget about that and assume that it doesn't matter to them. And I think it it prompts a further decline often. So, because I mean, we
Yeah.
all, when we feel good about how we look, we show up with more confidence. We show up as better versions of ourselves. And I swear for our listeners, we did not script this, because you could not have more perfectly when you answered about how to handle, and you'd said bringing that empathy to the table. That is like at the heart of, you know, my art of feminine negotiation, putting yourself in their shoes. And how interesting that you were also able to do that, because you were experiencing some of that at the same time with your mom. I think that's beautiful. Now, tell us what prompted you to write your book, A Cup of Tea on the Commode.
Well, okay, so I'm doing this thing, and I'm a writer. I did stand up and improv, and I wrote some screenplays and jokes and things like that in Hollywood. And I always took notes, and I always documented any family gatherings that we had, special occasions and things like that. I took my dad to Italy to discover the little village where his father came from, and nobody had been there in 100 years. And I shot a documentary of that whole trip, and it was very cool. So
Nice.
I was always taking notes with mom, because we had some very funny conversations. I said, oh, I can't lose these. So I shot video, I shot photos, and I took extensive notes. And I wasn't sure what I was going to do with those yet, whether it was going to be a screenplay or maybe a short film, a poem. I wasn't sure, but I had a few people who were going through similar situation. And I started coaching them, telling them what I was doing, and they were getting a lot of benefit from it. So I said, this is something I think that we can help some other people, especially men, jump in and do this, because it usually falls on the daughters to take the caregiving role. And I loved it. And my other siblings, I have 3 sisters and 2 older brothers, and they trusted me, and I think they knew I was going to do a good job. And when family came to mind, that there was nothing, especially from Jersey, you don't mess with the family. So I'm going to take care of things. And it was great, because they kind of yielded, and I did my thing, and they were very helpful when I needed help, to come in and help me when I needed. And my brother Michael handled the family finances. So that was a major thing that was taken off my plate. So I could just concentrate on taking care of mom.
Well, let me give a plug for the book too. I mean, I will say it's beautifully crafted, but it's a great resource for people. So if you're out there and you're caregiving, check out A Cup of Tea on the Commode. I think it's told with heart and warmth, and there's, humor in it, but also some really practical advice. Hey, where did the title for the book come from? It's kind of an unusual title.
Well, since mom couldn't walk anymore, and when she was able to use the walker, she couldn't get to the bathroom anymore, because the doorway was way too. So we had a commode very close to her bed. And sometimes Mother Nature took a little longer than we wanted on the commode. And so I tried to make it a little more pleasant. And her favorite beverage was a hot cup of tea, no sugar and skim milk. So I offered that to her one day, and it was a hit. And so that became a regular thing for us. So I thought it was kind of catchy, and it played a big role in our adventures.
Yeah, but I love that flexibility as well, Mark. I mean, it's like we're ticking off some of the elements of some of my art of feminine negotiation models, and it's that ability to show up and be flexible in our negotiations in life, in our relationships in life. So I'd be curious, what lessons did you learn about yourself in caring for your mother?
Wow. Well, I definitely learned unconditional love.
Yeah, nice.
Since I didn't have that kind of relationship in my life, and no children, and at that point I had no pets. We grew up with every kind of a pet. So I think I loved my pets unconditionally. And I have a chapter a little bit about that when I had some doubts about that. But this was, in business and in other relationships, I had a choice to walk away. And in this one, I did not have that choice. Or I took that choice not to walk away. I said, Mom's controlling this. She'll control how long this journey lasts. And I am in it with her until she wants it to end. And so I guess unconditional love, patience, certainly. There are times where you want to murder this person that you love so dearly, and don't do that. And then sometimes she would give me great tips. One day she says, I have not had one glass of water since I've been here. And she's been there for years. And I said, well, you don't like water if you never asked for it before. I'll get you one now. She goes, make it cold. And so I bring her a glass of water, because she always had juice or tea, hot tea. So I bring her a cup of water and she says, you know, you're supposed to drink 8 glasses of water a day. I said, where'd you hear that? She goes, I don't know, a long time ago. I said, well, you got 7 more to go. She goes, no, thanks. I mean, she'd come up with these things.
Yeah. And it turns out she's right.
Yes,
you do need the water.
but there's no way she was going to drink 8 glasses of water.
Now, so you've shared like a bunch of tips here. And again, I want to circle back just to be putting a pin in this for our listeners.
Okay.
So you've talked about listening, not taking things personally, bringing empathy to the table, putting yourself in their shoes, watching your pacing, patience, etc. Any other hot tips you have for negotiating with a loved one that you're caring for?
Boy, I think the empathy and the patience are the most important.
Yeah.
There's some silly things too. Like I have a chapter, and with my mom was absolutely true. I said, what is it with Kleenex and seniors?
Yeah.
I mean, these things are like the crown jewels, and they're designed to be used once, maybe a little more than that. But these things were shreds that were, abused and just abused. And then they take them and they hide them up their sleeve or in a pocket or the balled in their hands that you cannot open with a life-saving vice grip or something like that. So a lot of charm and humor. It's like separating a child from its baby blanket.
Yeah,
it was a lot of charm and a lot of humor and a lot of negotiating there. It was like, Mother, I've got a brand new, spanking new tissue that you can use for quite a long time. Yeah. And it comes with a cup of hot tea. And that was the closer where I finally got that tissue out. But my sister and I lived with my sister for a little bit while I was renovating an apartment. And this thing with Mom came up with the tissues, and we made a pact. We said, if we find either one of us stuffing tissues up our sleeve or in our pockets, the other could be put to death with our blessing. And so far we're okay. We've both survived.
And I like that you talk about that charm, because again, as you're saying that, I'm thinking about all the even further applications. Like so often when we're dealing with somebody who's really difficult, whether in business, in our personal life as a caregiver, that's when we get into reactive mode and we push back with that same kind of energy. And I am with you, Mark. My God, even dealing with bullies in my legal career and beyond, and with my coaching clients now, when you can show up with grace and empathy and be charming, it's like you're holding up a mirror, and then it triggers some sort of reciprocity where you get those better outcomes. So I love, you seem to live life to the fullest, moving seamlessly from, as circumstances change around you, from Hollywood to caring for your mom. And now you're living in France, tough life, what advice do you have for our listeners about negotiating your mindset to show up more powerfully and get more of what you want in life?
Well, I'll tell you 2 things. So when I had a snack food company that my brother and I started to honor my dad. He had he invented this half pop popcorn. He called Nutrinuts, and we renamed it Grandpa Poe's Originals. It became a national brand in the States for a while. And it was a tough job because I ended up being almost a one-man show on the West Coast. I built a factory, I designed all the equipment where I could run it, but it was hell cranking this stuff out. We worked with some big companies and they couldn't keep the quality up. And so I said, it's a secret recipe. So I took it upon myself to pretty much cook every little kernel. And it got very stressful over the years. And sometimes, I had to keep getting up early and sleeping late and working your tail off all day. And when the stress started to get, I just said, I love my job. I love my job. I love my job. And I just kept repeating that. I love my job. I love my job. And so that motto was certainly used and employed many times during the adventures with my mom. But also, I think I lived by, and hopefully people can understand this, but I always say, find the joy.
Yes.
Any situation, if you can find the joy in it, there's a lot of darkness and negative things we could focus on. Boy, especially the world today.
Yes.
And if you can find anything positive in any of that stuff, find the joy, and boy, life just gets so much lighter and so much fun. And can I tell you a strange story that has something to do with the negotiation? So when I was first in LA, I helped out a friend's design firm. And so I would stop in at certain periods. And one day, it was right in the heart of LA, and a lot of the workers parked And sometimes they blocked this one lady who was a neighbor's
Yeah.
driveway. And apparently, I didn't know the story until this day, but she would come over and scream and yell, and the people would be nasty back. So it was nasty, and it was no good. So I'm there one day, and a printer just delivered all these beautiful chocolates because they like to try to tempt you to want to print with them. So they give these gifts. So I was there this one day, and this angry woman comes in, and everybody from the company just kind of ran away.
Yeah.
And she comes in and she goes, "Man, somebody parked and blocked my," again. And the receptionist couldn't leave, but everybody else just scattered.
Yeah.
And I'm standing there, and I see this angry woman, and all these other people ran away. I'm going, "What's going on here?" And I said, "Madam, would you like a piece of chocolate?"
Yeah.
And this woman, I mean, her face completely changed.
I bet.
And she said, "Well, I would love one, but I need to watch my weight." And I said, "Madam, I'm looking at you and I think you're fine. You could handle any amount of chocolate today." And this lady left with a piece of chocolate and was floating out the door.
I love it.
And the company came and they applauded. And I said, "That's how you have to handle that.
I love
You
that.
guys are at fault. This is not her problem. It's your problem. Fix it. And this is how you can fix it."
That is such great advice. And again, Mark, on so many levels, right? I mean, at the highest core, we are so conditioned to have this win-lose mentality. And what you just modeled is, at the heart of, I think, how to get the world back in balance by negotiating differently with each other. I think that's gorgeous.
Mm-hmm.
What was one of the most surprising things that you discovered while taking care of your mom?
Boy, you got me. You know what? I would say, that I could handle this, I guess. But no, I think, especially with family, there wasn't a surprise. I was sad that it only lasted 3.5 years, but it was her time and she didn't suffer and stuff like that. So I think that maybe the surprise was I was able, and whatever this was, maybe my acting training or whatever, I was able to separate myself from the emotion until well after she passed. So it was, I had a job. Basically, I was like the nurse at that point. When she decided it was time to go, it was like a 5-day exit for her and 5 days of no sleep for me because I stayed with her and I held her hand through most of that time. And my brother came over another night and held her other hand, and my one of her grandchildren came and spent a couple nights with me. And it was the job. We had to do this. I had to administer morphine, which is terrible, but I tested it before I gave it to my mom. You have to do the syringes under the tongue because she started to have some pain near the end, not much. But so it was like, okay, this is what I need to do. And then when she left, I was still okay with it until I think after the funeral. And then everybody's gone. And then I was alone in her room. And then that's when I let it go. And I'm not shy with tears. So that was, I guess, the biggest surprise. But when I let him go, boy, that was Old Testament.
Yeah.
That was
the dam was broke. And look out.
Yeah, I was alone, luckily, because that was just sappy.
Yeah.
And
I
then
love that you're talking about the emotions, because I think we are so conditioned to shy away from that. And we are humans. We are emotional creatures. So owning it and recognizing it. And there had to be such a bittersweet release of so much for you in that moment. So I appreciate that. That's beautiful. Thank you for.
And I wanted her also, if she opened her eyes very infrequently during those last days, but I said, anytime she opens her eyes, I want to make sure she sees a smiling face. And not someone stressed out and worried and worried about themselves. It was like, no, this is your time to go. And we're going to send you off in a good way. She was Irish, so we played a lot of Irish music.
I love it. Yeah.
And
I want to just circle back to that when you say that, because I think that's again a point that's so often forgotten, that surrendering of ego, right? When we're negotiating generally, and particularly in close relationships, ego just comes in. And I love that you said that this wasn't about you. It was about her experience. I think that's a gorgeous approach. Now, we've talked a lot about some of the to-dos. Most of my questions have been around that. Any advice you have about some don'ts? Like when we talk about the do's and don'ts, what are some don'ts that you would suggest for caregivers out there?
It's part of a do, but don't overdo it, I guess, if you want to put it that way. You have to take the breaks. It's becoming cliche now, but there is a good reason why they say in an airplane, put your mask on before you help your loved ones, because you have to be healthy. in mind, in spirit, and certainly physically to take care of them, because there was, before I had my issues, I had to carry my mother everywhere. She didn't walk. I did get her walking actually though. So that was pretty good, but certainly don't push them, and don't push them too fast. I had to, again, I didn't want my mother just to wither away. She got to a point where she's very happy in bed, and I'd pick her up, put her in a wheelchair, take her into the kitchen for meals, and then sit her in her red recliner for watching Animal Planet and Wheel of Fortune and Jeopardy, and then back to bed. And she was certainly content with that. And I said, no, you're not going to do that. So you're going to help with laundry. We're going to do some exercises. And we played cards. We actually played Angry Bird on her iPad. We played cards where she cheated. She learned how to cheat. She was very good. And I asked her, I said, would you like to, let's try some walking. And she was perfectly game. And I got to a point where I had her walking every day first from the bed to the wheelchair, which was 3 feet. And then I kept moving the wheelchair further away, where she actually got from the bedroom to the kitchen with me holding her, but she was walking, and she hadn't walked for over a year.
That's amazing.
And so I would say, don't do that if they're really not capable, because she did have a hip replacement, but she said actually the replaced hip hurt more than her other hip. So we took it very slow. So I don't know if that quite answered the donuts.
Yeah, it was beautiful. And what's one of your favorite stories from your book or from your experience?
This is a sad one. It's well, it's not so sad, but we'll see. We'll see how I do with my emotions here. Okay. So my mother could be stubborn. She was strong-willed and stubborn. And so one day she wouldn't eat. She just decided she wasn't going to eat. And I did all the cooking. I did everything. So I had to come up with menus, and her taste buds disappeared a long time ago, but she still had a very particular palate. And it was like, oh, how could you not like this? And she's like, the texture, something. Anyway, most of the stuff she did, but this one, I made a very nice meal, and she refused to eat it. And it was maybe a stressful day or something. And I got angry, and it was one of those moments where it said, this will hurt me more than it hurts you, what the parents will say. And I said, you need to show some appreciation. I said, I do all the cooking, the cleaning, the shopping, I take care of you, and you need to show some appreciation, and I need you to eat because I need you to be strong. And she just sat there frozen. So I shut the light off in the kitchen, and I left. I went down to the basement and took out my frustrations on an innocent washing machine. And I came back a few minutes later, and I turned on the light in the kitchen. And she's sitting there in the dark. No longer in the dark, but her plate was empty. Her utensils were on the plate, and her hands were folded in her lap. And she ate her meal in the dark. That's not easy for anybody, but she did it. And I was just, again, that thing where this is going to hurt me more than it hurts you. Boy, it did. It hurt me more than it hurt her. And I didn't know what to say. I just leaned in and said, thank you. So that was a beautiful thing that came out of an angry moment. And it was beautiful on her part, not on my part. So
and I love your perspective on that, Mark. And again, I just want to make note of that for our listeners out there. So often, like you talked about that, finding the joy, I mean, what a game changer in life when we choose how to react. And so much of that comes back to our perspective, and the fact that you were able to bring that positive perspective to that situation that could have gone very differently. So
and I think a lot of that came from my upbringing with both of my parents. The humor was a big part of it, but my mother, I mean, both of my parents, my father's motto was others. He loved that prayer, that Catholic prayer, think about others before yourself. And that was his motto. And with my mom, I mean, the care she gave everybody that I knew, and especially animals, she was just amazing, and a giver and stuff. So all these things that I learned growing up, this was no big deal to say, oh yeah, I'm taking care of my mom. That's just it. Why? Because it's the right thing to do. There's no question about it.
But what a beautiful gift for her, but also it sounds, Mark, like such a beautiful gift for you to have been able to spend that time with her in that way, right up to the end. It's gorgeous.
I would say, because people go, oh, you were such a hero. I go, no, I think I was pretty selfish, because I got those those moments that my siblings, and I think another important thing about the book is I get to share all those moments that a lot of people missed, especially family. And can I tell you one more story that was pretty nice? Okay. So I invented, or I launched this thing called Day of Beauty. Again, going off, you don't lose wanting to be pretty when you're old. So I wanted to recreate that beauty parlor treatment at home for my mom. So we originally had it on Sunday, but being a Catholic girl, she said, nope, we can't. So I had to switch it to Saturday so we wouldn't be living in, I guess,
in sin.
Eternity in hell. So what I did is, I mean, she always 2 sponge baths a day anyway, but on these days, I gave her her sponge bath. And then when she sat on the Commode, I soaked her feet in Epsom salts, shampooed her hair and blow dried it. And she had beautiful long hair again. She had beautiful long hair as a young woman. And then of course that all goes away with the 6 kids. Now she had beautiful hair. So I would either braid it or put it in a ponytail. And her fingernails, I did the manicure. So bright red fingernails, even after the trimming. That took many weeks of Day of Beauty, and tended to her needs. She got a full massage and lotion and the baby powder and the new diaper and the new clothing. And I bought her a new wardrobe because I wanted her to feel pretty in this wardrobe, because those drab day dresses were just, you know what, that's a fashion niche. I can't take advantage of it, but boy, really, I went shopping. There's no beautiful clothing for older women. It's terrible. Anyway, so I got her all dressed up. I put her in her wheelchair. I put on red lipstick to match her nails. And I wheeled her out. Usually on the way to the kitchen, we have a big mirror in the dining room. And I set her in front of that mirror. And I leaned in and I said, who's that pretty girl? And she just beamed.
I bet.
It was like, that was a profound, the power of that was just amazing, because it's like, when's the last time she felt beautiful? Or anybody thought she was beautiful. And so every day, even between Day of Beauties, I parked her in front of there and just asked her the same question. Who's that?
Oh my God, you're melting my heart here, Mark. It's gorgeous. And I'm seeing so many business opportunities here, as you say. I mean, these are niches that need to be filled. I think it's just so inspirational. And I can't believe how quick our time's gone. You're a beautiful storyteller. And this, I thank you so much for sharing so vulnerably with us here. And I normally like to end by asking, what's one of the greatest mindset shifts you've ever had in your life? It doesn't have to be on this issue at all. You already talked about finding the joy, which is a gorgeous mindset shift. So if that's your one, that's fine. But if you had another one to share, this is the time.
I would go, or even the find the joy came out of, I think, I love my job. That mantra. No matter what job it is, you may absolutely hate it at the time, but put a positive affirmation on it, and you may find that it's not so bad, or you may find the joy in that, because that got me through so many hard, stressful moments. I love my job. I love my job. I love my job. So,
and so important, because it's like that. What's that expression, right? Not, true happiness is not getting what you love, but loving what you've got, or whatever it is. I bastardized that, but that gratitude, I guess, right? That is showing up with gratitude. I love this job. I love this job. So it's beautiful.
Even if it's not true.
Especially if it's not true.
Convince yourself that
so
there's something good about it. If nothing else, it's like failure. Failure is not a bad thing. You learn, I think, more from failure than you do from success.
Don't get me started. We could do a whole episode on that.
We go.
I think that's
back
so
next week with failure.
Well, we may have to do that. So where can people learn about you, Mark, and your book? And we'll make sure to put it in the show notes. But for people who are wanting to jot it down
it's
now.
a cup of tea on the commode.org. I have a YouTube channel. If you Google a cup of tea on the Commode, it's everywhere. The book is everywhere, but I also have the YouTube channel. I'm on LinkedIn, Pinterest, Instagram, TikTok. I've done probably 140 different teaser videos that are on the YouTube channel and on my blog and stuff like that. So there's a lot of fun, and most of those are funny. There's some touching ones too, but the best thing would be go to a cup of tea on the Commode. And then the book is available in a lot of online stores, including, of course, Amazon.
And And I recommend, as I say, guys, check it out, check it all out. Mark so beautifully takes a potentially really difficult subject, and given our sort of death phobic society, we don't talk about it enough, and handles it beautifully and with humor. And it's a great story just to read and to watch some of his videos, but also some great practical advice for you to apply in your life as a caregiver and beyond, because these principles apply everywhere. So again, thanks, Mark. This has been such a lovely conversation. It was such
Thank
a pleasure.
you so much. This was like sitting in my living room having a great glass of wine.
Yeah.
This is lovely.
It was fantastic. And for our listeners, I have no doubt you got lots of great value from this. There's so many inspirational messages here that can apply. We're all going to get to that stage where we've got a loved one that we're having to care for, but also just the ripple effect. Apply it now. Don't wait for that. Apply these principles in your life to deepen those relationships and get those better outcomes. So, and make sure to give the gift of sharing as well. Share this episode with people who you think can get some benefit from it. And make sure to subscribe if you haven't done that already. And before we sign off today, just wanted to share some ways that we can work together. If you're looking to up-level your negotiation skills so that you can negotiate your best life in situations like this and beyond, I've got everything from online to group to my signature VIP one-on-one programming available so that you can better leverage your innate power to get more of what you want and deserve in life. And if that sounds interesting, check it out at artoffemininenegotiation.com. Make sure to grab a copy of my book, The Art of Feminine Negotiation, if you haven't done that already. And that is a wrap for this episode. So until next time, go forth and negotiate your best life on your terms so you can stop missing out and start getting more of what you want and deserve from the boardroom to the bedroom. Until next time, take care.